dear speakers. We are very delighted to welcome you here in the Center for Development Research and on behalf of EADI. So I welcome you very much to the launch of the World Social Science Report in Germany. So we are very delighted to have Heide Hackmann with us, the Executive Director of the International Social Science Council, who published the report early this year. So I'd also like to thank the Center for Development Research for the nice cooperation in the last weeks. For those who do not know EADI yet, we are a European network of development researchers and institutes, and we aim to connect several disciplines as well as research and policy. Our secretariat is based in Bonn. And currently we have a partnership with the city of Bonn, and we organize a series of events on inequality. And this meeting today is a part of that series of events. Yesterday, the IPCC report 2014 was launched. This report is the work of thousands of scientists and was agreed after negotiations by the world's governments. The report states that climate change has already increased the risk of severe heat waves and other extreme weather. The IPCC warns of worse to come, including food shortages and violent conflicts. But it also found that ways to avoid dangerous global warming are both available and affordable. How can social science be shaped to address changing global environments to build a sustainable future? This will be in the center of the discussion today. I wish you a fruitful debate and give the floor to Anna Katharina.
Thank you, Susanne. Dear guests, dear colleagues, dear panel, I'm very happy to be able to welcome you in the name of the Center for Development Research and the Social Science Department here in the Institute. I first of all would like to thank Dr. Hackmann, Professor Müller-Mahn, Professor Riemer, Dr. Trombowski for coming, and EADI for establishing the contact and making this event possible. Thank you all for coming. The Center for Development Research is an interdisciplinary research institute here at the University of Bonn. We have a natural science department, an economics department, and a social science department, which I had since several months for the coming years. We work interdisciplinary, meaning we have projects that span all three departments in various world regions. In Western Africa, probably the biggest at the moment, in Eastern Africa, in Central Asia, South Asia, and a few in South America. We look at natural resources, mainly land and water, and how people live with and off these natural resources. And this, of course, then immediately links to the topic of today, global environmental changes and the role of humans in dealing with these changes, living with these changes. And I'm very happy to mention it again, to welcome all of you and to be able to offer a house, a home to the discussion of today. So I hand over to our chair and moderator of today, Dr. Trombowski from the German Development Institute. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anna Katharina. So my name is Ines Dombrowski. I head the Department of Environmental Policy and Natural Resource Management at the German Development Institute, which is just across the street. And I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to moderate the session tonight. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Heide Hackmann. She is the Executive Director of the International Social Science Council. She holds a Master of Philosophy in Contemporary Social Theory from the University of Cambridge in the UK and a PhD in Science and Technology from the University of Twente. Dr. Hackmann has worked as a science policy maker, researcher, and consultant in the Netherlands, Germany, the United Kingdom, and South Africa. She is co-chair of the International Science and Technology Alliance for Global Sustainability, which has established Future Earth, a new international research program for global sustainability initiatives. She also holds memberships in several international scientific committees, which I will not go into right now. And I would like to ask you to present the report now. And you will do so in approximately 30 minutes, and I will signal when the time is running out.
Thank you very much for the introduction, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. Very grateful to IADI and to ZEF for organizing this event. So thank you very much. IADI is actually a member of the ISSC, so it's good to collaborate in this way. So what I assume my presentation is, so it doesn't follow on from this opening slide, right? Alright, so what I want to do is start off by briefly introducing you to the process of producing a 600-page report. You know, how do we do this? Then go into the question, which might seem obvious, but it isn't to most people, why a World Social Science report on global environmental change? And then I want to give you very briefly an outline of the content of the report, looking more at the kind of conceptual framework that we use to construct this, put the content together. Briefly look at the key messages so that we have that as a basis for discussion, and then I want to conclude by giving you a little bit of an update in terms of what has happened since, or as a direct outcome really, of this work and the years that have led into this work. So in terms of the process, just to point out that it is this was based on an international effort which the contributions to the report, 99% of them came from a global call for contributions that the ISSC issued. So we, through our networks, through the networks of all our members and partner organizations, we sent out a call, and this is what's led to a report that brings together the voices of over 150 authors, social scientists, 99% of them, from 23 disciplines and all regions of the world. Everything was externally peer-reviewed, all contributions peer-reviewed, and the entire report, once we put it together, also externally peer-reviewed. It's the first world report we did, which some of you might be familiar with, in 2010. We co-published with UNESCO. This is a collaboration between ISSC and UNESCO, the World Reports. UNESCO published the very first one in 1999, but found that it was a very difficult process for a UN agency to undertake. There are things that we can say as an independent international NGO that a UN agency cannot say. So it's easier for us to write world reports, but it is a collaboration with UNESCO. And we were very excited when OECD agreed to come in as an additional co-publisher for this particular report. So it is available on the OECD iLibrary. You can download it for free with access to all the statistics. And most importantly, there's an interactive blog on the ISSC website. And the purpose for this is that we never claim that this report is a comprehensive assessment of what has been done in the social sciences. It is a starting point. It is a vehicle for mobilizing a community, for starting a debate. And so we've challenged people, if you find the missing chapter in the report, if you're critical of something in the report, please help us to develop this work and join us by submitting your views via the interactive blog. Why did we do this? What was the objective of writing a report like this? First of all, we wanted to advance a particular social science understanding of global environmental change. We've been trying to do that, and we have done that through, useful and very important programs like the International Human Dimensions Program, which is co-sponsored with the United Nations University, ISSC, and the International Council for Science. But really, there's still, in the broader global change community, still lack of understanding about what is the unique social science framing of the issue. We wanted to then give some sense of what the social sciences are contributing. It's not always easy. A lot of social scientists, we have to admit, will use the argument of as long as you give us more research funding, we promise we'll show you what we can do and we'll do useful things. We actually wanted to show what useful things have been done so far in the community. We also wanted to, and this is a function of all the reports, we wanted to assess capacities of social scientists in different parts of the world to actually undertake this research and to link their research with policy and action. We very definitely wanted to influence research programming and funding. And in my conclusions, when I tell you about a new funding program that we've launched, I'm happy to say that this is one of the boxes we are able to begin ticking. And most importantly, we wanted to mobilize a wider social science community. If you look at the IHDP, which has been in existence since 1991, you will see that I think it's true to say that in global environmental change research, it has, from the social science perspective, been quite a closed community. And a lot of the people working in that community have been sometimes marginal to the social sciences. They come from other fields of science into this human dimensions work. What we've been arguing for many years now, together with IHGP and others, is that there are mainstream social scientists, psychologists, sociologists, anthropologists, you name it, who do not label their work as being global environmental change research or climate change research, but they are working on theoretical, empirical work that is highly relevant to the agendas today and to the knowledge needs of today. So we want to mobilize that community, find ways of engaging them in the debates around global environmental change. So our primary audience were social scientists themselves, their colleagues in other fields. We wanted this report to speak to natural scientists, engineering, humanities, health sciences. We most certainly have messages in the report for international scientific organizations, for ourselves, for the ISSC, for our colleagues, the International Council for Science, for UNESCO and other UN agencies. Research funders, as I've said, and then those who supposedly use the outcomes of social science research. So decision makers, policy shapers, activists, citizens, practitioners, and other users of social science research. So what makes a World Social Science Report on Changing Global Environments a flagship report? What makes it timely and relevant? So we've clearly timely knowledge. It's not a hard argument to sell. The IPCC report launch has been mentioned. Clearly a report on any report on this topic responds to the sense of urgency about climate change, biodiversity loss, extreme events and other environmental changes that are threatening the well-being of many societies and particularly vulnerable communities as we speak. So it's timely knowledge. But what makes a social science report so relevant are the unique contributions, I think, that the social science disciplines can make. So make no mistake, solving these or addressing these kinds of issues is certainly a joint effort that requires the work not only of social scientists but of their colleagues in other fields of science to ensure that we protect the planet's resources while also safeguarding human security and well-being. This is a joint scientific challenge for the entire community. But we argue that the defining characteristics of today's global realities make social science knowledge indispensable. And what are those characteristics? First of all, it no longer makes sense to try and separate problems of the environment, climate change, biodiversity loss, and other environmental changes, from other social, political, cultural, economic crises and problems, from poverty, from inequality, from social discontent. These are all linked in complex ways. They're part of complex social ecological settings. And to try and rank them in terms of prioritizing action just no longer makes sense. Yet we still hear this from policymakers. I've sat in rooms with policymakers where the argument has been very strongly made that we need to solve poverty before we address climate change. So what we're saying is, in a social science understanding, this doesn't make sense. The inseparability of these problems means that the social sciences need to step in and help unpack that complexity. The second element of, or characteristics of today's global realities is that we live in a time when human beings themselves are a primary geological force, the Anthropocene. So global environmental change is literally about people changing global environments. And we need to understand what that means. What responsibilities does that bring with it? What does it mean to live under those conditions? And what opportunity does that raise as well? So the centrality of people makes our disciplines and the kinds of knowledge that social sciences bring indispensable. And finally, everything we know about today's threats to the environment, to our planet's resources, call for profound social change, deep social change and transformation. And the social sciences need to help us understand what that means. What would it mean to live and possibly thrive in and follow potentially, completely new development pathways? What would that look like? What are the realities associated with that? So this is what we believe makes for indispensable knowledge, and why we felt that a social science report on this topic was important. So it's not a report where, when you look at the outline, where you will see a chapter on water, energy, land, urbanization, etc., etc., etc. We felt that what we needed to do was to identify, and we had done this work before the report. We had started the report work with a knowledge framework to try and articulate what are the fundamental social science questions that one has to ask regardless of the concrete challenge being addressed. So whether it is water, land, food security, energy, climate change, or whatever the case may be, if we want our knowledge to contribute more effectively to durable solutions that are also equitable, then what kinds of social science answers are we looking for? And we call those sets of questions, which the report has now used as a framework for its content, the transformative cornerstones of social science research. And so it's against this background that we've brought together these 150 plus authors to, in the first place, advance our understanding from a social science perspective of the complexities and urgency of global environmental change and sustainability. And here really what social scientists, what you'll find in this chapter is the emphasis on context. For social scientists, context matters. The important point being, it's not just context in a geographical sense. It's not just about where people and communities are located, but it's context also in a personal sense. Professional, personal identities matter. Gender matters enormously. So there you will find this kind of perspective in this particular chapter. It's also about saying history matters, and just as history matters, so our thinking and our capacity to think creatively about futures also matters. It's all part of the complexity of the issue. So that's the one chapter. We then go on to draw attention to the real-world consequences, direct and indirect, of environmental change to individuals and communities in different contexts, be they geographic, cultural, personal. And in doing so, we advance our understanding of vulnerability and resilience of people's uneven capacity to cope and to respond to the risks and challenges of global environmental change. So consequences, important. We then go on in the chapter with a number of interesting articles, also some survey results that illustrate really the role of the inner dimensions, the role that we often don't talk about, the role of values, worldviews, and beliefs in how people interpret, how they make sense of, and therefore respond to threats. How they make sense of the changes that are happening around them. So, for example, reporting on international surveys which show that the environment actually features low in people's overall concerns about key societal issues, from health, education, crime, poverty, etc. The environment is quite low. And what is interesting is that people often it ranks lower as a personal rather than a national problem. So people will say in terms of national issues, it's important. In terms of personal issues, less important in the rankings. And that gives you a sense of how these inner dimensions of people's understandings, personal sense making actually are important. Also interesting work on how the youth, work by UNEP actually, on how younger adults do give more importance on, have more pro-environmental attitudes, but at the same time feel hampered by current economic and cultural conditions to actually have the choice and the freedom to act on some of their concerns and values. So again, you're showing those complex linkages. We then go on to what is probably, for the social scientists, the biggest ask at the moment. So if you talk to many natural scientists, we find this in discussions of future Earth, for example, in visioning exercises about priorities for global environmental change. What a lot of the natural scientists look towards the social science community for is how do we change behavior? That's the big thing. What this chapter shows is that the issue of change is actually really much more complicated than that. It's not only about individual behavior and attitudes, it's about social practice and the systems and the institutions in which practices are embedded. It's about who decides on the direction for change. It's about questions of when does talk about social change become talk of social engineering and become politically and culturally unacceptable. It's about deciding who determines the direction of change. So, you know, vast area, and we give a snapshot of some of the contributions of the social sciences, which really show that there isn't one silver bullet. You don't just, you know, here's the answer to changing behavior. So as you know, so a lot of natural scientists will end up saying, oh, as usual, social science is more complex than we need them to be, but that's the reality. So we then go on to another cornerstone of the social sciences, which is really to ask what happens when we foreground ethics, justice, responsibilities, you know, intergenerational justice, those kinds of issues. What are the implications of doing so? And ethical dilemmas of, for example, closing the gap between people's expectations about participating in processes and their level of influence. Interesting work around those kinds of ethical issues. And then finally, the enormously important and huge as well topic of new approaches to governance and decision making at different scales. So what kinds of structures do we need at different levels, from the local to the global? We found that in the call, interestingly enough, the bulk of the articles that came and fell into this chapter were about the need for more inclusive policy processes. That led to a lot of work on what's the role of indigenous knowledge and of, you know, social movements in policy making, grassroots movements, campaign groups, etc. And also, interestingly, what is the role of science in these kinds of decision-making processes? The report then also has a chapter which, as I've said, is the purpose really of all our reports, to take stock of social science capacities to undertake research on global environmental change in different parts of the world. And the bibliometric analyses, which you'll find all the data in the annex of the report, are not surprising. They show what the 2010 report shows in terms of the overall production and use of social science research across different regions of the world. The capacities are primarily in the north, which means, though, that for this topic, that where the research is often most needed is where there's least capacity to produce that research. So there's enormous consequences of that in terms of, you know, when we work with development donor agencies, etc., about research capacity building. And as I've said, there are annexes not only on the capacities of social science or the status of social science research on climate change and global environmental change, but more broadly. So every report you'll find an update on indicators of social science knowledge production and use, and those are included. So, as you can see from some of the illustrations, the idea that runs throughout the report, is that global environmental change changes everything. It is the proverbial elephant in the room that we can no longer ignore. It changes our life support systems, it changes our livelihoods, our ways of life, it changes how we interact with each other, and we believe it changes the demands on the social sciences. And so the report ends with calling for a new social science for sustainability, one that is bolder in terms of really reframing global change, environmental change, as a social process, not as a physical process only, but as a social process. A social science that is better at using the knowledge we produce to infuse real-world problem solving, that is closer in terms of making that link between knowledge, policy, practice. One that is bigger in terms of having better capacities in the parts of the world, especially where those are needed. And one that is different in terms of how it thinks about its own practice, what it means to produce knowledge, how knowledge is produced. And each of these four messages come with some elaboration and action steps, which I can't go through in detail, but basically frame the change. So here we really have to provide more work on understanding the social lenses of climate change, revealing those, highlighting the role of people behaviors, and in so doing, opening up spaces for social innovation. Often when you do this kind of social science work, the picture that emerges is not just one of doom and gloom. If you understand that the role of people, the role of values, beliefs, you also understand the spaces, the opportunities that it creates for change at an individual level, which could be scaled up. So it is about spaces for opportunities and innovation. Enable the change, social science that works, that provides solutions that work for people and the planet. So closing that gap between knowledge and action means social scientists have to start being prepared to take the lead and engaging with decision makers, working with societies, working with the users of research, and building what we call open knowledge arenas, where there's a mix of knowledge producers and users that are working together in networks of mutual learning. Building capacity for change, point is to say this is not just about human capital, it's about institutional resources, it's about building critical mass, communities of practice, and not just capacity to produce knowledge, but also to communicate. So we need to take the lead in this kind of integrated solutions-oriented research. And finally, for social scientists to think critically about, if we want to do all this, we have to perhaps think about changing the way we go about our practice, embracing interdisciplinarity, and more than that, embracing transdisciplinarity, the idea of knowledge that is co-designed and co-produced together with other knowledge partners who are valid holders of knowledge and also valid producers of knowledge, is something we need to take seriously. So, as I've said, the report is a starting point. It is a starting point for rallying a further social science engagement. It is not comprehensive, it's not an assessment like the IPCC, it's a vehicle. It's a basis for discussion and the development of mobilization and resource strategies, and I'm delighted to be able to tell you that we are certainly moving in the right direction. So we have launched earlier this year, with the support of the Swedish government, SIDA, Swedish Donor Aid Agency, a new global funding program on transformations to sustainability. And this in itself has been an interesting conceptual framing shift. SIDA asked us 3 years ago to start developing ideas on social sciences and climate change. We pushed that to social science and global environmental change. We pushed it to social science and global change, and then we got it to transformations to sustainability, which is a much more inclusive, much more open to also picking up on issues of inequality, poverty, etc. Anyway, this is the ISSC's contribution to the new Future Earth research program that has been mentioned, a program that has been established and that is co-owned by an alliance of organizations that you see here. and that includes the United Nations University, which is represented today by Jakob. The idea of the program is to build a global knowledge trust on social transformation, to inform effective and equitable solutions to the urgent problems of global change and sustainability. A lot of people, as we've presented this program to other donors, because we're trying to get more money for this program, have said, well, what's the theme? Why is it not on land or energy or food? So the theme is we all talk about transformation. We need to understand what it looks like. So we've designed a program that does two things. It will fund what we call transformative knowledge networks. These will be 3-year initiatives. They will get funding of about €1 million each over a period of 3 years. The idea is for these networks to be led by social scientists, that they bring in colleagues from any other field, natural scientists, whatever, engineers, but they have to do solutions-oriented research on social transformations. They choose a concrete challenge, be that land, energy, food, water, urbanization, pollution, health, whatever, or the nexus, which is very popular now, and look at that in specific contexts of application. So we're trying to get social scientists to do work on what is social transformation, what does it look like in different settings, in relation to different concrete challenges, what can we learn, how does it happen, can you steer it, can you make it happen, what are its primary characteristics. We want that kind of knowledge to build into a global knowledge trust, and we will bring these networks together on an annual basis to take stock of where we're getting on building the knowledge trust, not only on social transformation but on new ways of doing science in transdisciplinary modes. I can't go into the details. I want to just tell you that we launched a call for seed funding to get the community, because the program's asking them to do a lot, to get them to sort of put in place new communities of practice and get ready for the call for transformative knowledge networks. And we've got 500 plus proposals. So fantastic, because it means the social science community actually is ready to respond to this kind of call. And that has made the funders sit up and listen and take note. So we are opening a call. It's a completely open call. It's not just for those who got seed funding in December this year, for the first series of transformative knowledge networks. We are confident that there will be a second call in 2016, because at a recent meeting of the so-called Belmont Forum, which is a global forum of national funding agencies, the European Commission announced that they're willing to put money, serious money, on the table for a new ERANET initiative. Some of you will know what that is. Essentially, it means incentive money from the Commission for national funders to pick up on the topic and develop multilateral programming. So potentially the money that we've got from CEDA is now being leveraged. We are able to say that we've influenced European Commission funding, so that's great for our reporting this year. And I hope that we will see some innovative responses also from you. Please feel free to contact me directly if you have questions about this. You will find all the information on the ISSC website. Thank you for your attention.